Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much. So, we are getting ready to go into session 2, and I am delighted to hand over the facilitation baton to Patrick Worms, who is the Senior Science Policy Advisor at C4 ICRAF. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you, Constance. It's my absolute delight to be here today because Regreening Africa, as we've just heard, is such an extraordinary program. It's not just about putting a little bit of greenery in the landscape. It's about dealing with governance. It's about dealing with gender, value chains, about everything that makes human life worth living. So what exactly is the secret sauce for Regreening Africa? What is it that makes it unique? Really, two things that we're going to be looking at in these sessions. The first is partnerships, how to get everybody to work together. And the second is research in development. Not research for development. It's not scientists in their ivory towers coming up with brilliant ideas. It's scientists and citizens and farmers and partners working together to develop things together. And to look at that, we are going to start off with Mika Born, who is the project manager for Regreening Africa, and who's going to tell us about the secret ingredients that she has used to make partnerships work. And we all know how useful and how important these partnerships are. Just think back to the talk we heard about the exclosure bylaws in Ethiopia. You had to work with government to change these exclosures so that silviculture could begin to happen there so that people had some benefits. So I very much look forward to hearing Mika talk about partnerships. Then we're going to be hearing from Lee, who is the global research leader for soil and land health and the co-lead for the Coalition of Action for Soil Health, and Tor Gunnar Wagen on how research and development works in practice before looking at some examples from Ghana and from Kenya. And with that, Mika, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick. I'm just going to spend a few moments explaining the program structure to put it all together as you start to hear examples of how it'll work together. So as we've mentioned a number of times, Regreening Africa is quite a unique program in the way that it's structured. We have a research organization, C4 ICRAF, that's leading in terms of the program management and providing technical support in terms of implementation and different practices, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And we've just heard a presentation from Tess Faye. Shared, which is stakeholder engagement with evidence, and you'll be hearing more about that soon. Land degradation dynamics, with the presentation coming up from Lee Winawiki and Tor Wagen, and around communication. And then in the countries, we have a range of NGOs that are leading the implementation. So we have World Vision, Oxfam, CARE, CRS, Sahel, ECHO. And in each country, there is a number of them or one of these NGOs operating at the community level and really driving the implementation. At the national level, we have oversight committees, which make sure that we're linking to national governments and policy processes, also linking back through the European Union delegations and to other key actors in the country. And throughout this process, we have a great feedback mechanism between the community, the implementing partners, researchers, government, and all of the other actors. So I'm very excited that we're going to be hearing a few examples. And as we have for the last session, just to highlight a few messages, just as Patrick had mentioned, strong partnership that includes government, community, development, researchers, donors. It's very, very critical. It is the foundation of this program and why we think the efforts will be more sustainable as well as more impactful. We also really want to highlight that we can bring science, research, evidence, and monitoring into the global and local restoration agenda, and that this can really accelerate impact and also show the impact on the ground. So handing back to you, Patrick. Patrick.
I'm so sorry, everyone. I started speaking, not realizing that I had muted myself and turned off my video. Apologies for that. So we've just heard that introduction on how the partnership is supposed to work. But how do we do research and development in practice? How do we include citizens in that? How can we align everyone? And how can we do so at scale across large, poor rural areas, which include a significant portion of the population which might be interested but is illiterate? Lee, I think you have a solution to that. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Patrick, and a big warm welcome to everyone. I'm Lee Winowicki. I'm a soil scientist, and I lead the global research team at C4ICRAF on soil and land health, based here in Kenya. And today we're absolutely thrilled to talk about how we're bringing together scientific research and citizen science to essentially scale landscape restoration and accelerate impact on the ground. In the next slide, you will see that we've highlighted the benefits of this combination. So by engaging in citizen science, we are enhancing the participation of farmers, development actors, stakeholders in land restoration monitoring. And when we combine scientific research, we can deepen our understanding of the effectiveness of these interventions, but also drivers of degradation, root causes, which of course we're trying to tackle. This diagram at the bottom really shows how we're combining remote sensing, the systematic field sampling using LDSF, as well as citizen science using the Regreening Africa app, all culminating into these co-designed decision dashboards. On the next slide, I'm trying to demonstrate what are the benefits of these tools. Why can't we just use one? Well, the diagram or the photo taken by Kelvin Trotman on the lower left is an actual photo of the field teams using the LDSF to monitor trees, soils, land health, which allows for consistency to compare between sites and location. Remember, we're trying to track changes over time. This really means we need a systematic and consistent framework to allow us to understand the impact of the restoration activities over time. We also, by using a systematic framework, we can build robust predictive models, and this really allows us to assess multiple aspects of soil and land health. Now, on the right, you see the Samburu Mama using the Regreening Africa app, measuring the DBH of the tree, and this is about bringing stakeholders into the monitoring process. This completely closes the learning loop. It encourages not only participation, but co-learning. It also helps build robust and large data sets and facilitates this data collection. So the next slide is really about what is this LDSF I keep talking about? Well, it's called the Land Degradation Surveillance Framework. It is essentially a systematic, consistent, field-based framework that assesses multiple indicators of soil land health at the same geolocation. The green dots on this global map show where the LDSF sites are. Each dot is 100 square kilometers. And I put these photos of the teams in the field. So Anna was presenting from Senegal. Here's the Senegalese team using the clinometer. And we heard from Rwanda, there's Providence on the lower left doing some soil sampling in a banana field. So this is a field-based monitoring framework. Now, what can we do with these type of data? So on the next slide, we just highlight one potential output. And here, decided to focus on a key indicator of soil health, which is soil organic. We like this indicator, and I saw some questions in the chat about what about soil? What about soil conservation measures? Well, soil organic carbon is a key indicator that responds to management. And it influences many other properties such as water holding capacity, soil stability. So on the left is a map of eastern Rwanda. The upper count district is Nyagatare, where there's an LDSF site, and the lower is Kayonza, which also has an LDSF site. Now the glaring yellow parts on the graph on the map are low carbon, and the darker parts are higher carbon. Now, for those who don't like maps and prefer to look at box plots on the right, these are box plots of 4 different vegetation and structures on the left and the soil organic carbon content on the x-axis. The dotted line shows that the median carbon was about 2% or 20 of carbon per kilogram of soil. And what is interesting here is the width of each box plot of each vegetation structure is similar. This shows that the variation of carbon between woodland, shrubland, grassland, and cropland are similar. And what is notable here is that we know that the variation in between these categories is due to management. And that's why we're all here today. We know that through soil and land stewardship and restoration, we can improve soil and land health. And we're very proud of this publication that's come out of this project. Now, if we go to the next slide, my colleague Tor Vaughan will explain more.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I'm gonna kind of switch gears a little bit more about citizen science and how we are kind of overlaying that or using that in combination with what Lee just talked about. So basically, with citizen science, what we mean is public participation in scientific research, and Lee already mentioned that, of course. So I'm specifically going to talk about the Regreening Africa app, and I know a lot of you have heard about it and a lot of you have used it. We've had some really impressive use of the app. It's actually been a big surprise to those of us who have developed it. And basically in this app, we have a tree planting module, we have a farmer managed natural regeneration or FMNR module, a nursery module, and a training module. So I'll show a little bit of results from that later in terms of the use. But this is really an app that helps us to generate data around what is being implemented on the ground. So you can see some photos here on this poster of people using it in the field, measuring trees, recording interventions, etc. on the ground. And that's the key part of that. So when we started it out in 2019, this is farmer managed natural regeneration, and what these bubbles show is the number of records that have been uploaded in that year. So this is 2019, and we can see that for most of the countries, we have a few where we have green bubbles. Some we have nothing, like Niger and Rwanda. And then Senegal, we have some more in 2019. If we go to 2020, we see that Senegal is increasing quite a bit, and that we have now countries like Niger coming on, and Rwanda also having some plots, Mali and Kenya in particular increasing. Go to 2021. We see Senegal increasing further, but now Niger is starting to move. And basically by 2022, Niger has the highest number of submissions with this app. It's a very, very impressive data set coming from Niger this year. And we are in the process of analyzing that now, and I'll come back to how we're integrating that in a minute. Now, if we go to tree planting, we have a slightly different picture. So here we can see nothing from Niger in the beginning as well, but also countries like Rwanda, Senegal, Mali having quite a few. And then Rwanda in 2020 started early, and we had quite a lot of activity on tree planting data coming into 2021, even more so in Rwanda. But now we see Ghana coming up here. So by 2022, Ghana has overtaken Rwanda. And basically, this shows that the uptake of the app, and also thanks to the support of Mohammed, Bernard, and the team here from ICRAF, and our friends in the various NGOs in the different countries that have been supporting the use of the app and sort of pushing this. What we're doing at the moment is taking the data that's coming from this app, and I'm not going to go into detail here, but the idea is that with all this information, we know with the farmer polygons, we can start tracking the vegetation dynamics within those farmer polygons. And then we can start identifying where in these landscapes do we see a regreening trend. So what you see here is a map of Rwanda. Just going to show Rwanda as an example because that's what we started with in terms of analysis, but we will do this for all of the countries. So the idea here is that what you see as green on the map here are areas where we are detecting a positive trend. So you could say a regreening trend. The red are areas where we're not detecting a trend, so we're not able to see a trend, at least not yet. But the nice thing about the data coming from the app is that we know when the interventions happened, and we can then track relative to when people reported the interventions happening. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Regreening Africa dashboard. So this is where we are essentially bringing it all together. Today, I'm not talking about the data reporting system for the Regreening app, but we also have that for the raw data. But the Regreening Africa dashboard is where we bring these things together and kind of synthesize the information as it's coming in. And what we see here is that at the moment, we have, since about 2019, we have about 159,000 farmers registered with the Regreening Africa app. So, which is extremely impressive. So about 85,000 with tree planting, the tree planting module, and 74,000 with the FMNR module. And this is just those two modules. So not even counting the nursery operators and things like that. So there's even more to this than that. But for those two modules, a very impressive number of farmers. We've also developed tools on this dashboard where you can essentially explore interactively areas that you are interested in within the respective countries. So I'm just taking two examples here to finish off, but one for this is for Senegal, same area in the next slide, but basically here I have marked on using the indicators that we generate information on. I can look at where do we have opportunities for land restoration? What's the relationship between vegetation cover and carbon and various other things? So the kind of linking back to what Lee was talking about earlier. Or we could look at where do we have areas with severe constraints. And the nice thing about the dashboard is that all this information, as you explore, you can download all of this to your own computer, and you can then upload it into, for example, a GPS unit or a smartphone, and then go out in the field and as you plan activities with farmers, for example, to plant more trees, so put in soil and water conservation, etc. So it's basically this whole sort of ecosystem of different things that are happening here, from the structured data collection through to the citizen science data collection, the app, which allows us to generate a lot of data, and then integrating all of this on the Regreening Africa dashboard. Thank you very much. That's all from us. Back to you, Patrick.
Tor, thank you very much. That is an absolutely fascinating presentation, a fascinating set of 3 presentations, and it leaves me with some questions. Mika, how easy was it to set up and grow these partnerships? Lee, how did the LDSF framework benefit from Regreening Africa rather than the other way around? And Tor, when you have 190,000 odd farmers all using the app and all submitting data, how do you deal with data quality issues? I don't expect you to come back and answer these now. We have a roundtable. This is what these presentations leave me with. However, what we're going to do now is to figure out how these insights, this research and development and these partnerships work in real life. We're going to do that by first looking at Ghana, where there's a legendary team of Edward Akwegunara, the project manager from World Vision, with Philippe Atim from Catholic Relief Services Ghana, and the absolutely amazing, astonishing Gloria Adiga from Ghana's Forestry Research Institute are going to talk to us about Ghana's Northern Restoration Initiative. And Edward, you're speaking on behalf of your colleagues. Over to you.
Yes, so thank you very much, Patrick, and good morning from Ghana here. And like Patrick rightly mentioned, I am making this presentation on behalf of my colleagues. So Ghana would be giving you 2 major highlights from our perspective. Would be showing to everybody here what the team have been doing with respect to Ghana's Northern Restoration Initiative process, and also we'll be sharing some key highlights on some of the gender transformative approaches we're using through the gender research. So next slide. Yes, so the Northern Restoration Initiative. This is an initiative that the team thought about it a year ago, and basically it is an initiative that is meant to look at tailored solutions to solve the challenges in the issues of land degradation in northern Ghana. So Ghana is basically divided into 2 major parts. We have the southern Ghana and northern Ghana. So southern Ghana is largely forested, and northern Ghana, where the project is currently being implemented, is desert, if you like, or has higher issues of degradation. But often than not, what we've noticed is that some wide-based approaches are used in dealing with all those situations. And we are thinking that in terms of some of the broad objectives, what do you want to achieve from this? First, we are looking at how we can create a platform to upscaling successful restoration practices in northern Ghana. So we are looking at tailored practices that work in the context of northern Ghana that we use for it. We're also looking at a situation whereby we do not just want to end the project and nothing else is happening. So from what Bernard said in his introductory remarks, is looking up to what teams are planning to do in terms of communication and scaling out. So we are trying to use Northern Restoration Initiative as an avenue to scale out and spread the information as to some of the successful restoration practices that has been carried out in Ghana. So what are some of the key processes? So in doing these northern restoration initiatives, we have held various stakeholder fora at the district level, regional level, and we'll soon be doing one at the national level. And basically, we've been sharing some experiences and sharing some lessons across stakeholder bodies as to what we can do to improve the northern landscape. We've also held focus group discussions and key informal interviews, all geared at taking very key lessons from other partners. We've also done some dissemination and taking some feedback as to what we can do to improve upon the situation around the landscapes in northern Ghana. Next slide. So in terms of the roadmap, where have we come from and where do you want to go and what changes do you want to see? So like I said, some district or some level of engagement were held. And what do we do within this engagement? We're sharing information, we're sharing lessons, where we spoke to partners about what the project have done. We took some feedback from partners as to what they were also doing differently. We noted what we thought we had done well within our northern landscapes. And we also identified some priority actions where we use as a basis to scale up or to inform some policy change. So in terms of where we are now working as a broader stakeholder. We have involved some major stakeholders to see how we can scale up the major practices that are successful within northern landscape. We are looking at how we are able to work to bring up some policy and institutional changes to enhance the context of northern landscape. We are looking at where we are doing more of the discussion on evidence and science, where we are using the Regreening African app to see how we can successfully gather data, where we have some of the testimonies coming from partners who have practiced over time and they've shared to members. And we're also now looking at how we can build stronger partnerships. And just like Mika mentioned, in terms of what is possible, we think that partnership is very key in going ahead. We are not able to do this alone, and we should be able to do this with others. In terms of where we are going to, we believe that we cannot achieve this without involving key government stakeholders. So at the moment, the team is currently putting up some concept and proposal together to be submitted to the Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology. The essence is to see how we can integrate some of the key technologies that we have witnessed on the project, such as FMNR, how we can improve on situations of bushfire prevention, what we can do in terms of behavior change, to see how government can mainstream this into some of the extensive processes. So at the moment, we are taking some feedback from a broader stakeholder, and we are still seeking more information from stakeholders. So now we have taken some of the feedback from district, we've done that from regional, and we're doing that from the national next month, and we'll gather more information there where we can enrich the process and present that in a form of a proposal to the ministry for government adoption. So what changes do we expect to see from this? We expect that in the end, there should be an effective coordination with tailored strategy interventions to the savanna landscape. We've noticed that, like I mentioned earlier, there are some policies that are kept broad spectrum. They do not work in the context of northern landscapes. We identify some of them. So for instance, the Forest Service divisions have a mandate to promote only forest species. We are looking at what we can do to include economic trees that can enhance value chains and also increase the prospects for economic benefit. So the other change we are expecting to see is to see how we can accelerate the scaling landscape restoration and also improve food security within the landscapes. Next slide. Yes, so this presentation would be highlighted on the gender transformative research that has been carried out in Ghana. So basically some tools were adapted, and the major aim of rolling out these tools was one, to create awareness on gender roles and norms, also to challenge allocation of resources and decisions, to address power relations between and others, and also identify shifts in behaviors and barriers. So what have been some of the key outputs that have been achieved? So you notice that from Tesfaye's presentation, so much have been achieved in Ghana in terms of women involvement, and that is true. So in terms of the initial outputs we have seen, there have been increased to access of fertile land by women. There's balance in household chores. So you see men helping their wives or their spouses more with household duties and lessen the burden on women that can engage themselves in other economic activities. We can also see women increasingly making decisions into their household priorities and what can be done. And this has overall improved household relations, and children are generally having a great well-being where they are able to achieve their potentials. Next slide. Yes, so what does gender transformative approach outputs mean for us, and what restoration outcomes do we intend to get? Yes, so it is noted that within our social structure, women's rights of land use access remains embedded in men's rights. So this is an area that we believe that there is still the need for continuous engagement and tailored action to change this norm. So we expect that when we carry out these gender transformative approaches, we should be able to build resilient households. How do we do, or how do we achieve this aim of building resilient households? There's the need for constant dialogues and trainings to unpack underlying causes and inequalities. This, we believe, when it's done, we are able to unearth the issues and set goals, progress markers, and we can constantly review these ones to see how it meets both the needs of men and women. Also, there is the need to have or to cultivate gender champions. And we are saying that this should be done at the community level. We are saying that we should scale up gender transformative approaches across all the programs. It shouldn't only be in land restoration, whether it is a health project, it is an advocacy project, whatever it is, we should include the issues of gender into it as well. And we believe that continuous training and advocacy works just like we are doing now. We are currently advocating for everybody to see how they can include issues of gender transformative approaches in their programming. Next slide.
Could you wrap up, please, Edward?
Yes, so in terms of the challenges and opportunities, we believe that Northern landscape have similar challenges, and a single design will be able to work for all. So part of the key challenges, we are looking at where there are data gaps, policy gaps, and we think that when these are addressed, we're able to handle the issue of Northern restoration. Next slide. So what are the key lessons learned? We are saying that periodic review of policies to address land restoration gaps is necessary. And we're saying the enforcement of planning and bylaws are also very key. Continual research and integration of environment land degradation issues into educational curriculum is key, especially in getting the youth involved. Next slide. Thank you, and ready to take another response. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. What a lovely example of how to use partnerships. I was there at that meeting in Accra with you when we discussed having this Northern Restoration Initiative, and it's progressing with the help of so many partners all the way up to government. A submission to a ministry is being planned, but at the same time, you're going right to the core of the family, helping men and women understand each other better and share duties, responsibilities, and rights more equally. It's absolutely beautiful. But Ghana is not the only place where this is happening. Kenya has a landscape restoration movement, and that movement is being informed by the lessons of Regreening Africa. And Laura Mukwana, who is a stakeholder engagement and restoration consultant, is going to tell us a lot more. Laura, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Patrick, for that wonderful introduction. So over the next few minutes, I'm just going to share with everyone a few key lessons and insights that we have gotten from our work building a restoration movement in Kenya. So I'm going to take you through why we needed to build a movement, the process, and the achievement, some of the key learnings. But before we move into that, I think it's important to now have some definitions just to define what a movement is, just to define what movement building is. So a movement is basically an organized effort by a large number of people to cause a change or impede a change. And movement building is just now that whole process of bringing all people together, influencing them up towards a common vision. And why do we need movement building? Why are movements necessary? They're really necessary because, firstly, they raise awareness about a certain issue. And they raise an awareness with the aim of getting support for that issue and generating a desired outcome or generating a desired change. And they also create a platform for action for people who support that cause or desired change. So why did we need to build a movement in Kenya? Why did we bother building a restoration movement in Kenya? First of all, there was the issue of the whole scale and impact of land degradation in Kenya. So Kenya, it's estimated that 30% of Kenya's land is severely degraded, and this is expected to become even worse with the rising population growth. And then there was political goodwill for restoration. And this was demonstrated by the commitment that have been made by the Kenyan government towards restoration targets at international, national, and regional level. And lastly, there was that need to scale like existing restoration efforts, which are fragmented, so that we can ensure that the country will achieve its the commitments that it has made. For example, Kenya's pledge to restore 5.1 million hectares under the AFRI 100 target by 2030. So when it comes to the process, I think the Kenya National Landscape Restoration Conference, which was held last year, mid last year, was key, was at the center of this entire process. But before that, we had a series of 6 pre-conference thematic webinars, which built momentum towards the conference, and it provided stakeholders that opportunity to discuss the themes further. It looked at things such as youth engagement, monitoring, various landscape approaches, private sector involvement, training and capacity building. Then we had the conference in July. And then after the conference, we had some action groups, because during the conference, stakeholders came together, they discussed the various themes at length. They came up with recommendations. They agreed on action plans on how to, on action plans with regards to the various themes. So these action groups were now formed to implement these action plans and to continue the conversation further. So in terms of what we have achieved so far, we formed the 7 action groups, like we mentioned. These action groups bring together an estimated around 100 different organizations. And these action groups meet regularly. Most of them meet monthly. We have had capacity building events targeting youth, targeting women and faith communities. And we've showcased women leadership, celebrating it, what they're doing in restoration. We're in the process of developing a strategy for faith-based regreening in Africa and in Kenya, and also a call to action to continue the mobilization of stakeholders, faith communities around restoration. And lastly, we've managed to develop a national landscape restoration monitoring framework through the Restoration Monitoring Technique Working Group. So in terms of the key lessons, these are takeaways for anyone who wants to build a similar movement around restoration. These are the critical things that need to be in place. So firstly, there needs to be continuous mobilization of people into the movement, because people can't go out, and this needs to be done through the use of effective key messages that articulate what the movement is about. And in some cases, this needs to be tailored around the different audiences. You need to identify and align political opportunities, like what was done here. There was that commitment, the government had made commitments. That makes it easier to get political support. And there's that need to put in place structures for mobilization and organization. So when it comes to mobilization, using existing social networks such as churches, mosques, using social media, and now moving further from just mobilizing to organizing them. And that's what we've done with the action groups, organizing them, because it's really important to do so. Otherwise, the movement will really have a focus. Then identify passionate leaders and these are leaders who are dedicated to the cause, leaders who can motivate other people to participate as well, and mobilizing resources to sustain the movement. So we've mostly been doing virtual events, but now we have observe that there's that need to now move on to having physical events and joint actions which require funding. So those are the key lessons. And moving forward, what we're planning to do is now continue engaging further, mobilizing the social media, doing more capacity building for youth, for women, for private sector actors, for faith communities, and also now just doing a follow-up conference at the end of this year just to see what's the progress made, because we had action plans, what's next, and now trying to get people to pledge to move the movement forward.
Laura, could you wrap up, please?
Yes, I'm actually done. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for such a passionate presentation. You know, when you talked about mobilizing people, developing the right structures, finding passionate local leaders, that reminded me of Barack Obama. He was a community organizer before he became president, and he had 3 key words for getting a movement going: organize, organize, and organize. Thank you also for the useful reminder of always trying to align ourselves with whatever the political machinery is up to. That can always help. But really, how do we take all that, this partnership effort, this research and development, these budding efforts in Ghana, Kenya, and elsewhere? How do we go about integrating them? How do we go about continuously learning? How do we effectively integrate all data, the science, and the practices that Regreening Africa has brought to the fore in order to inform the management of regreening efforts on an ongoing basis? And that, of course, is the specialism of my dear old Constance Neely. Constance, tell us how it's done. Give us some key points on how to do it in the future. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I so appreciate how you keep all these threads connected. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about integrating evidence and practice for adaptive management, and we're going to focus in on a specific activity that we do, which is the role of joint reflective learning missions. And I just want to highlight that this presentation is done with my co-developers of the shared process, Sabrina Chesterburn and Mika Born Oching. So with that, how do we make sure it is evidence, our evidence is integrated into practice and policy in supporting adaptive management to achieve the livelihood and restoration impacts the project has laid out? Well, one of the pivotal elements of the Regreening Africa design and implementation has been the use of the shared methodology, shown here, the framework on the left. We've been using the methodology, which is a structured engagement process for evidence-based planning, decision-making, and implementation, learning, and responding. The Shared Decision Hub is made up of a collection of stakeholder engagement and behavioral specialists and a wide range of scientists that work very much in a transdisciplinary fashion. And within the project, within the Regreening Africa project, the use of the shared approach has been used to strengthen the linkages across science, practice, and policy, and very much among our country teams. And we focus on relationships, tailored engagement, and access to evidence to support learning implementation and policy dynamics, as well as the co-generation of solutions. So through the shared process, with an emphasis on the learn and respond phase of our framework, we've designed a robust engagement phase of the framework, and we have solidified engagement processes to bring experiences and evidence directly to jointly determine how to adapt and refine annual planning. So with that, introduce for the joint reflective learning mission. What is it? It's a reflective and learning process among diverse partners to interrogate and integrate multiple sources of evidence into our practices, into our policies. So the Joint Reflective Learning Mission brings together practitioners, brings together farmers, pastoralists, scientists, and decision makers to interrogate and reflect upon their evidence and the scientific evidence, their practical experience to adapt plans for greater impact. It took shape in the form of field visits by multiple stakeholders, the interrogation of evidence, reflection on our implementation, our scaling and leveraging beyond the project, and influencing policy outcomes. And with a little bit more detail, our field visits incorporated interaction among these different stakeholders in the farmers' fields so that we could learn directly what was working and what was not working. The interrogated data, building on the field progress, the information, challenges and opportunities that have been reporting, the citizen science coming from Regreening Africa app, and land health data that have been presented so beautifully by my colleagues Tor and Lee. Then we've reflected on what it means for future implementation, for further scaling and leveraging, and we designed amendments, the technical support, the implementation, the outreach, communications, capacity building, based on this exploration and interrogation. And then we use tools such as outcome mapping to clearly articulate the target stakeholders, the process for engagement, and how to clearly message the way forward. So just as an example, you can see on the left, field visits followed by structured reflection workshop, which is all inclusive. And then when we hit COVID, we had to adapt. We went virtual, but there were still typically field visits, but then followed by a very inclusive virtual reflection workshop. And I want to take this opportunity to just mention that we do undertake to ensure that the evidence is presented in the most accessible format, be they pictures, stories, data visualizations, and maps, as Tor and Lee have also shown. So what changed? I'm just going to give a couple of examples to give you a sense. So we did start to have these thematic cross-country learning events to share what do we all collectively know about this gender transformative approach and how do we want to include it. The scaling model for Senegal was adjusted based on the Joint Reflective Learning Mission. And as Felix has shown, a greater diversification in Rwanda. There was greater uptake of the Regreening app by engaging so closely with the team members and those that were creating it. And then, of course, we targeted technical support and emphasis on where we needed additional resources to continue to reach those targets and to leverage to new sites. So a few aspects of joint reflective monitoring and learning include the approach really does bring a way to create a safe space for honest reflection, structured dialogue, a deeper understanding of the overall system, monitoring that goes beyond documenting, and the strengthening of relationships and enhancing interactions. And I just want to emphasize in this last slide that the JRLM is a scalable approach that can be applied in multiple contexts. And it is readily scalable. It's about building relationships among researchers and development practitioners, using skilled facilitators. It offers a clear path to co-generate solutions based on evidence and experience, and helps to close those learning loops to facilitate adaptive management. Thank you so much.
Constance, thank you so much for explaining how we can take all of these things away, how we can ensure that they fertilize our brains as we continue with this exciting work of trying to read landscapes at very large scales. Now, that's it for our presenters, ladies and gentlemen, but we have 15 minutes left, and I know you're all dying to stretch your legs, but before we do that, I'm going to ask the panel to answer a few questions. And the first one is for you, Laura. Faika-san asks, if 70% of the landscape in Kenya is degraded, what would you say are the key drivers of that degradation, and how can they be reversed? Laura?
Expect. Okay, thanks, Patrick, and thanks, Faye, for those questions. Okay, first of all, learn to clarify, I didn't say 70, actually 30%, which is severely degraded. So some of the drivers include expansion, cultured land, biomass extraction, that's charcoal, that's fuel wood, and then of course there are those socioeconomic factors such as population growth, so it's land governance, the whole issue of governance. So I think when it comes to dealing with some of those drivers, it's now of course putting in place policies to control, and also I think restoration plays a bit, because if you talk about agriculture, if I look at one challenge like agricultural expansion, just restoring the existing agricultural land will really help with that. Then putting in place places like, of course we have them here in Kenya, where we have the 10% cover on farms. That will really help deal with issues such as that will really depend on forests and for fuel wood.
Laura, you have a follow-up question from somebody else, from Peter Heads. A bit more world weary, that question. We 40 years, at least 2 generations of movement themes on forest landscape restoration in Kenya. Traction does remain limited. Why is traction so difficult? What would you say to that?
Wow. That's a very good question and quite complicated. I would say one of the reasons has been probably not enough funding to sustain the movement that has been done, and then not the fact that we have not had people who, like leaders, who are taking on that the long term. So those are critical things. And probably, I think before we didn't really have political support for restoration, but now I think this is the right time, because there's so much support, many policies, there's so many strategies in place.
Constance, you spent a significant part of your time here. You know the situation there very well, and you are doing this joint, doing all of this work around SHARE to try to align the interests of disparate stakeholders. Would you concur with Laura of key issues that bedev forest landscape restoration in Kenya, or do you have a different perspective?
Oh, I think I could only compliment what Laura had said. That was a great presentation, Laura. But I think what I would say is that we have the opportunity to really shape these movements and mindsets through the strong multi-stakeholder approaches, as we're seeing in a lot of the landscape management tools. But the idea of shifting our thinking, of, as Tor and Lee have also mentioned, getting that citizen science to motivate people to see their progress. And so I think it's that engagement. I think Ravi even said it as well. It's about people, it's about practice, and it's about behavior. And thank you for the evidence that's offered up so we can see those decisions come to life. Thank you.
Thank you, Constance. Indeed, it's about practice. Some of the most heartwarming experiences to see how excited farmers get to finally have data on their fields by using the app and to participate in this grand experiment, which they recognize could transform their continent for the better. There's one other interesting question, and that one is more for you, Edward, and for Gloria's background from Dr. Michael Abedi-Lorti. He would love to know how the gender transformation approach is perceived locally and the lessons that are learned in the various settings around that gender transformation approach. How does it fare in cultural transformation in particular? Edward?
Yeah, so I'll just briefly say something, and I'm sure Gloria may want to add to that. So in terms of how it's perceived locally, usually these are within our culture setup, people are not used to. But because we have strategically positioned gender champions at the community level, these are people who periodically visit these households, and they are able to, help them address some of the changes they are about to see within the households. And is that this is the change from the perspective of the meals, but who have accepted the benefits that are coming to the household. And gradually we are seeing that they are beginning to appreciate the role that their couples or women play in terms of household decision and also in terms of landscape activities. So maybe if Gloria will want to add something, I will stop here.
So Edward, you've witnessed that yourself, right? You've been in some of these involved in some of this gender work?
Yes, I've been involved in this some of
Could
this
you,
gender
could you
work.
give us a paint a word picture of what that looks like in real, how you know, the typical patriarchal attitude to an attitude that is more open and more equal genders?
Well, it is say that, and it very why I say that to support their spouses and take some chores, they've seen that spouses are able to increase their income, and based on that, they are able to support household, you know, take care of the expenditure. So it is that some of them thought that they should have done it's long overdue, and they have not been doing it.
So money makes the world go inside the family. Thank you, Edward. We have some more questions. Sorry, I don't see any here. I see a lot of people who are congratulating the panel. Unless there are questions coming into the Q&A chat.
Patrick,
Here we
perhaps
go.
we should
Yep,
invite Lee.
We have a question for Winowiecki. Lee that you made about the app and about the LDSF led to a lot of excitement in the chat, which I'm discovering now. And quite a few of these questions were, can I use it elsewhere? Can I use it outside of Africa? How can we expand the reach and the benefits of the app? Lee, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick, and everyone for these brilliant questions. And absolutely, the Regreening Africa app was originally the brainchild of this project and from the interaction with partners. But now over 12 projects are using the app. We have seen it be downloaded in over 56 countries. So yes, that's outside of Africa, and absolutely see the app as a tool that can be scaled to other initiatives. I see Elvis is on the call, the Great Green Wall. I see many other partners who are working with county governments and national governments, and we are super happy to collaborate and support anyone who's interested in using the app. We just met with a new NGO in Nepal, so we may have to change the name from Regreening Africa to Regreening App. So please reach out to us and we'll be happy to support.
Do you have any indication of, you said 51 countries, any indication of the number of farmers around the world that are already using the app?
So we have over 140,000 individuals using the app and registering these polygons and restoration activities. It is, as Tor's bubble graph was showing, it's really exploding in terms of its use in these countries. Lots of potential. And the idea with the link between the LDSF and the app is that now with these georeferenced polygons and activities, they're going in the restoration, and that can link these data with soil organic carbon, soil erosion, tree biodiversity, key indicators, biophysical indicators of land and soil health.
And as I know, Lee, you will find a lot of players, carbon investors, banks, etc., who are sniffing around the app, who think that the data it generates is marvelous. Do you also begin to see that from the perspective of politicians, to get back to the point that Laura is making?
First, I will be clear that we follow all data privacy guidelines, and no data are shared or open because we are protecting the farmers who are collecting these data. This is a very important point. But as Laura also pointed out, we are really so pleased to be engaging with several county governments who are actually implementing restoration and using the app to track their restoration interventions. And this is so important that we have donors, governments, NGOs, farmers, all rallying around the scaling of landscape restoration and have acknowledged the important role of monitoring and co-learning in this process.
Super. Truly, this is such an exciting approach, right? The fact that we have data, that we have dashboards, and that the data is provided by these hundreds of thousands of citizen scientists is, for me, one of the most heartwarming thing of this thing. We don't. I want to say we don't need this big machinery, governments, and all the rest of it, as long as people themselves can do it. But of course, would lie. We need all of the partners to be involved in this partnership. And maybe Mika, you can finish it off in a couple of minutes by telling us how all this bubbling of initiatives is actually contributing to regreening and how we think it might continue after the project formally finishes.
That's a big question for 2 minutes, Patrick, but I'll give a summary.
I know you can do it.
So I think what Regreening Africa show can bring together all these different components, these different tools, these different experiences. We can look at equity, we can look at rights, we can look at practices, we can look at monitoring and research, and we can bring it all together. And I think this has really shown what is possible. And I really hope that from this, we'll hear this at the end of the sessions as well from a number of other partners. Many of these aspects are now being drawn into big initiatives. We hope to contribute positively to the Great Green Wall, AFR 100, other big initiatives on the continent that can learn from and can take on these. And also hope to see further scaling of in the countries, and obviously a lot of work toward environment, but I don't want to give away too much of the. But I think that there's a lot that can be taken forward, and we're seeing that already happening. And we hope that this and these collaborate.
Much everyone, I'd like to join me in virtually clapping wonderful panelists and to thank them for an exciting session. Now, 3 minutes left before we have the next session. What we're going to do. You're going to turn on your camera and stand up from your chair, as I'm doing now. Shy, you need to stretch your blood to flow and everything. Now, you're going to close your eyes, lift your arms, and imagine you a tree. Leaves are drinking in the goodness of the sun. Your arms are stretching towards the sun. And now there's a bit of wind coming, and your branches, your arms are beginning to wave about as the wind is strengthening. Good Lord, the wind's getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Your whole body is shaking. Your legs are moving about. The roots are straining to keep you in place as the wind buffets you around. It's bending you over to the front, it's bending you over to the back, it's making you twist in every which way. And the wind slows down, the sun goes down, your leaves droop, and you're done. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your fascinating questions, the wonderful chat. Thank you for the panelists for giving us hope that we can fix this planet from the mess that we've made of it. To Constance session. Thank you very much.
I think going a minute's break just in case. Constance, in case people need.
I think that would be grand. Let's take a couple of minutes just to thank you so much for the stretch. But if anybody else needs to get a glass of water or take a short break, we'll come back in 2 minutes. Thanks so much.